So just a few words about the law school itself. We are a World Top 100 law school according to QS 2020. We are occupying a new law school building that was just opened in 2016. I will say, although I know Dahi is on the line, my office is nicer than Dahi's. I have an office on the top floor, so I can see, in order to give you a sense of how large Northern Ireland is, I can see the mountains right at the southern end of Northern Ireland from my office on the 9th floor. So it's really quite a lovely building, and a lot of the building is operated around you, around the students. So we have meeting rooms that we try and use. We have some teaching rooms. We have a moot court, for instance, that we try and use and we'll be using in the new year. And we're linked directly into the main teaching centre on the central campus, which is the Peter Froggatt Centre. The law school has one of the advantages of living in a relatively small city like Belfast as a law school is that we're really very closely and tightly linked in to a lot of the organisations and institutions in the city. So we have close and ongoing access to the High Court, Court of Appeal. We have access to the Northern Ireland Assembly, and indeed the Assembly is occupied by a number of our graduates, including the First Minister is a graduate of the school. We also have access and spend a lot of time talking with the law firms that are in the city. So there's a lot of global law firms have a presence in Belfast, running a lot of the functions, especially functions that come out of London. So Alan Novery, Arthur Cox, Herbert Smith Freehills, for instance. And as a director of grad studies, I spend quite a significant amount of my time liaising with law firms and talking to them about our curriculum, talking to them about our priorities in terms of the skills that we want to deliver to master's students, the kinds of research that our students are interested in, and the kinds of skills that employers are interested in order that we can try and use our curriculum to deliver on some of those skills and help you develop your skills. We also have access to a lot of public bodies in Northern Ireland, for instance, the Human Rights Commission, the Belfast City Council, the Judicial Appointments Commission, etc. And all of these organisations, in my experience, are very interested in working with students and in being in touch with students. And so we try and manage that relationship in order to kind of maximise the advantage for you. And also, I think it's very important for us as a law school to always be listening to the people that will eventually employ a lot of you, or the sectors that will employ more or less all of you, and listen to them about what they think about our graduates, what they think about what graduates need in order to flourish in the workplace. So just before March, sort of in the early spring, we had a really substantial workshop where we had 40 employers in the school, and we talked through our curriculum and listened to them talking about how they want to develop their graduate entry pathways and how they want to think about developing their own workforces. So it was a very fruitful discussion, and it goes back then into the curriculum when we start thinking about how we assess, how we talk about law in general. As I say, the law building opened in September 2016. We have a moot court, we have interactive teaching spaces, we have a social hub, and a one-button studio, which we're very enthusiastic about, where students can go in and record podcasts, record pieces to camera, etc. The LLM Law is kind of a program that I regard as kind of the almost spine of our master's studies in the school. It is a program where we allow the student to build their own pathway through our wide range of modules based on our own research experience. So the LLM Law, I see it has been very much linked to that membership of the Russell Group. we bring our research into the classroom, and then what we're really very keen on doing is supporting students in developing their interests and in linking the disparate areas of law that we teach according to their own interests and priorities. So the school is very well known for human rights, for law and technology, for business law. So I'm a corporate governance scholar. I'm very interested in business and human rights, which I'll come back to in a minute. And we're very well known for our work in transitional and criminal justice as well. So we teach a lot of modules on our master's programs towards this, and the LLM Law allows you to choose your pathway through. And so what are we looking to do? What are we looking to support you in developing, and what's the kind of the graduate of this program, what do they possess as far as we see it? Well, the priority is always a critical awareness across areas of law, which means that we encourage you to assess and to assert yourself and assert your ideas on the study of law, and to develop ways of writing about and communicating about law at an advanced level. We're very interested in how law operates in and through society. So for me, for instance, as a scholar in business and human rights, not only am I interested in linking two areas of law, but I'm very much interested in how businesses operate in an environment, and how they use law, and how they're regulated by law in order to operate, and how they speak about themselves in those circumstances. And we're also we're very interested in school in thinking about employability and your skills that will help you develop your career. Now, those critical skills are absolutely crucial, and I think we always hear from employers is that decision making is a really key skill. That they say we want to see people who can make recommendations and make decisions, and so we'd like in the master's program just to encourage you to make decisions about the things that you're studying, and to write about it and argue for those decisions. So that's really what the key to the LLM in law is. We have a range of modules in the school, and in the autumn semester we'll encourage you to take 3 modules from this list. I won't go through them all, but I'll take, for instance, issues in corporate governance, which is a module that I know very well, that really thinks about how boards of companies are regulated towards how they run the company. And there's a lot of very interesting debates there about how law needs to be very restrained in this area, because we want business people to be free to make business decisions, but how law also has to recognize the impact that business decisions can have on society. And so it tries to regulate to a degree, but it doesn't do so in a punitive way in the UK. It does so in a way that's known as comply or explain. In other words, comply with various regulations. Company boards have to, if they want to trade their shares on the stock exchange in London, or they have to explain to their shareholders why they don't comply in some way. So one rule is that the chair of the board, the person who sets the agenda for the board, should not be the chief executive of the company. So there's a separation of powers. But companies are free to explain to their shareholders if they choose to actually combine those roles, where the chief executive actually chairs the board as well. Other modules are, for instance, controlling crime, that looks at issues around policing, human rights in practice, that takes a view of really trying to think about how human rights law is applied in society, and transitional justice, that looks at how justice systems and criminal justice systems support transition away from conflict, etc., which of course is a very substantial issue in Northern Ireland. I don't know if Dahi wants to step in and talk a little bit about law and the challenges of technology.
Sure. Well, law on the challenges of technology and regulating innovation are new modules we're introducing, following up on feedback from current LLM students as well as from employers. So in regulating innovation, we look at the varying ways in which commercial, regulatory, etc. systems deal with emerging business models, the now familiar, powerful technology companies, but also more novel areas around artificial intelligence, algorithms, etc. Whereas law on the challenges of technology is where we look at how new hardware and software is being used in the legal profession, in policing, in the functions of the state. So there's kind of a topical dimension, but then there's also a set of questions that arise which link quite nicely to other modules. So students on the LLM Law, for instance, might choose one of those technology-related modules, but then also be studying something like crime or corporate governance or human rights and start to develop the links between them, which, as Kieran will go on and say, links to the research dissertation that students would carry out towards the end of the program.
Thanks very much, Ty. That's exactly it. And that's, I think, key to the LLM Law, and it's what makes it unique. I know that one person asked about this in the when they registered for this webinar. What's the difference between this program and an LLM in human rights law? And the difference is the LLM in human rights law is, relatively speaking, determined, and for very good reasons, but it really focuses down on aspects of human rights law. The LLM law allows you, for instance, to take some human rights modules, so you develop a bit of knowledge and you develop a critical insights into human rights law, and then also to take, for instance, law on the challenges of technology. So then you can start really thinking, especially as you develop as a researcher towards a dissertation, you can start thinking about how the two interact. So it's about developing that sense of expertise that's bespoke to you. Okay. So let me just move on now, if I can, to modules in the spring. When I say we take 60 credits from, some of our modules are different sizes. So what you're doing through the LLM Law is you're assembling credits across the semesters. We try and balance it out. So in essence, you take a third of your credits in the autumn, a third in the spring, and then your dissertation is itself a third of the credits, or delivers a third of the credits for your masters. So in the spring, we have a lot of modules, and they do change every year, but this is what we're looking at for the year to come thus far. And again, you can see a whole range of themes developing that you are absolutely free to choose from and think about what you want to do. So everything from medical law and ethics to international financial law, trade law, and business and human rights, etc. Regulating digital communication, there is an intellectual property law module, and so you would be free, in essence, to work on intellectual property, and in another module to be working on, say, counterterrorism and human rights. I'd point as well to leadership and innovation skills for law students. That's the module where you would be taking classes with students from all over the university, facilitated by the graduate school. And what that module is designed around is students meet with clients, they meet with employers, and they're given a project to do that they do in collaboration with students from across the university. So you can have a law student, a student from one of the sciences, a student from the humanities, etc., on a team, and you work together. We're very excited about that. It tends to work very well, and our students tend to do very well in that module. Your assessment in that module, as with everything else, sits in the law school. So so we make sure that that what you're doing speaks to the rest of your program and works with your program. I should say it's copyright in the digital environment is our key intellectual property module. Sorry. Going on to the dissertation. So a master's program is 12 months long, and you will spend, roughly speaking, from May until September writing a dissertation. They're about 15,000 words long, which feels very daunting when you start, but it's the equivalent of writing, 3 essays. And you would do that under supervision. So it's very important at this stage in a master's that the student is taking the initiative and is working on something in great depth that they're very interested in. But you're not left alone to do it. So in the initial phase of the dissertation, you're supervised, you're working under the supervision of a member of academic staff. We match up your topic to the expertise of our staff, the research expertise of our staff. And then in the second half of the summer, you're in a writing up period where you're developing the text towards submission. Okay, and so what we hope and what we normally see is that you finish at the end of September and graduate in the winter graduation just before Christmas. We do have an option on our dissertation module, which is called the Dissertation in Practice, and this allows you to integrate placements that you've done, any workplace experience that you have, or other experience that's relevant to your scholarly research. You can bring that in and write a bit of a learning journal about it. What skills have I developed in this placement or in the workplace? What have I discovered through my work on the placement that surprised me, that I hadn't encountered in class, or what resonated. I remember talking about this in a class in the autumn, and now I see it happening in practice. I see law being applied in practice through a placement or through my workplace experience. So that's what the learning journal does. And then you can write a shorter dissertation essay. So part of the word count essentially sits in that learning journal. And then the remainder of the dissertation can be on topic your choice, or it can be actually building on the placement to say, well, I really want to drill down on something I did in my placement and understand it from the perspective of my studies. All of this is supported through study skills tuition. So we have methods, a methods module that all LLM students must take in the spring, approaches to legal research. And we also have a dissertation skills module where we speak with students about how to ask questions in research, how to work with citations, how to build up their citations, etc. So we have all of these supports in place to help you manage the dissertation. In terms of the dissertation in practice, I do think it goes right to the heart of our ethos as a law school, which is to think about how especially master's study should be a bridge towards the next step in your life and in your career. That's very important to us. So just moving on to fees and scholarships. The Northern Ireland and EU students from the EU, the fee is £6,140 for 2020 entry. Students from Northern Ireland are eligible, are normally eligible for student loan. Students from England and Scotland and Wales have a slightly higher fee. There are a number of scholarships available. If you follow that link, and we can put this slideshow up on the chat, just make sure that you're eligible for those scholarships. There are not a huge number of master's scholarships available in the university, but they are available. I would say, if you're eligible, apply for the scholarship. It is always worth applying for these scholarships. And there are student loans available, as I said. For international students, the fee is £16,900 for 2020 entry. There are a number of discounts and scholarships available to you as listed on this slide: the International Office Postgraduate Taught Scholarship, the Early Bird Award, if you pay by a stipulated date, and the Vice Chancellor's Scholarship. So there's a link there in the slideshow that you can go and have a look at these scholarships. And again, I would strongly advise you to apply if you're eligible. I say this because I have seen on occasion in the past moments where very few people have applied for scholarships. So so it's always worth trying, you know. Okay, and there is my email address. As you can imagine, at the moment I live on email, so I'm very, very happy to take any queries from you and to work with you to ensure that you're satisfied that this program is right for you, or any other program is right for you. I'm an academic, so the priority for me is that the students we have are satisfied that they're doing the right thing. You know, I want them to work hard, but mostly I want them to feel like they can trust that they're in the right place. Okay, I think that that's the end of the slideshow, so I'll shut this down a little bit. And if you have any questions, I'm very, very happy to answer them. You can just put them in the chat, or as you can see on Teams, there's a little hand, and you can raise your hand, and then you can. I will ask you what you want to say. Yes, media defamation law. The copyright in the digital environment, we've done a little bit of work on that. It's as a master's course. It's kind of narrower in focus than covering all media law or anything like that. It's about digital environments, and it's but we will cover some of that in there. Dahi actually is I think a very well-known expert in platform law. So this is an area of interest for us as we develop our scholarship and our education around law and technology. Let me see if there's anything else as I go through. Gemma, as you see, Gemma O'Donnell has been answering a lot of your questions. The application deadline, as Gemma says, there's no set deadline. I think if you apply anytime between now and really the end of August, we'd be you should be okay. Jenica, I think Gemma has mentioned the FAQs. I think, you know, it's likely to be some period of isolation, and we would seek to support you in that. Dahi, did you want to say something about media law?
Sure. Following up on Daniel's question, our new module in regulating digital communications has a good deal of material around the application of media defamation, etc. law to online platforms. We've also introduced a new module called Data Privacy and the Law that takes data protection and the general data protection regulation as a starting point, but also explores a range of other privacy-related issues. Daniel, we've had a few dissertations on defamation in the last couple of years, and I guess that's a useful point, that the modules are a good starting point for research projects, but there's a wider range of researchers in the school who are able to supervise projects and to lead you through material in a whole range of areas. Since we had a dissertation on how Northern Irish defamation law was differing from changes in England and Wales, as well as a number of other legal systems. We had a question from Sarah a little earlier on about, do you have to have studied something in order to take a module on that? And that's certainly not the case. So to take, for instance, our existing module in copyright and the digital environment, every year we have some students who might have studied intellectual property as part of an undergraduate degree, but there are many who are studying IP for the first time. And we take that into account when we are setting readings and materials. So there's certainly no requirement for a student on the LLM in law. You do have a free choice across the modules. What you have specialized in your past study would not be a factor in your choice of modules. And that would not be unusual. Many students alongside you in class would be studying one of these more advanced topics for the first time.
I'd add to that. Thanks very much, Dahi. That's really helpful. I'd add to that. There's generally a secondary question there, which is, if I haven't studied this, will I do worse than somebody who has studied it? And the answer is, I mean, I'm a little bit geeky, I have to confess, and I enjoy looking at mark spreads and seeing how patterns develop and all that. The answer is generally no. Prior experience doesn't give you an advantage. What happens is people read up very quickly and they catch up, and then they find areas that they're interested in. And it's really important, master's student, as with any module, is you should have that general overview you're getting in class, you're getting from your general readings, and then you specialize. You find something you find an essay question that appeals to you, and you make decisions about, I am going to address this question in the following ways. You try and drill down a little bit, and staff are always happy to support you, to help you with that. So yeah. Chloe, you asked when do we get to pick our module options? Upon registration, so as part of registration, you have to choose your year's pathway. But if you change your mind, and a lot of people do in the first week or two, we switch you on to other modules. So you can sort of take a look, say, these are the things that I like, and then put them down. And maybe, you're coming to, either you go in for a few weeks and say, actually, maybe I should have done something different. Come and talk to us. And again, with the spring modules, if you find something in the autumn and you say, well, actually, it surprised me, it's a little bit interesting, I wish I had chosen that module for the spring, some module for the spring, you can do that. We'll switch you over. Okay. So we don't want the computer system, excuse me, we don't want the computer system to dictate your pathway as much as we can. Of course, if you change your mind very late in a module, we can't switch you over because you'll have missed too many classes. Okay, so let me see who else, and please ping me if I've missed your question. Christoph, I don't know, yes, Gemma answered your questions. Part-time students, in essence, the part-time student chooses half the credits of the full-time student. Now, that sometimes doesn't work out perfectly. So it might be in year one, you will take 2 modules, and in year 2 you take, in the autumn, for instance, and in year 2 you take 1 module in the autumn, or vice versa. So we kind of dictate a little bit around this, but mostly you're free to choose. But a part-time student effectively is doing things at half the pace of a full-time student, except for when it comes to the dissertation, which they tend to do in the summer of second year. And so to be supervised through the late spring and summer of second year. And let me see, if I scroll down, excuse me while I do that. Advice regarding the balance across the options chosen. Yes, we're always here to give advice. I do think it's important to reach out at that point. Balance, I'm a little bit wary about, because I think you can I would never give a student advice, say, well, you should be taking some business modules and some human rights modules, for instance, because it would be very likely that it would be my interests I was responding to rather than yours. But what we would be saying is, for instance, if you chose all human rights modules, I might say, well, wouldn't you be better off taking human rights masters, and we switch your registration over? Mostly, I think what we need to be there doing as academics is responding to you. So very often a student will kind of say, well, I'm not quite sure what I want to do. I'm interested in these areas. What do you think? And we would facilitate your thinking on that, and act as sounding boards, expert sounding boards on that. Clement, you're saying that the audio is as bad as Gemma says. Just email me. I do apologize. Amanda. No, I think you're safe enough, Amanda. You completed your LLB degree in the south of Ireland. I did my degree there as well. So you'll be safe enough. We support you. And again, it's about sort of saying, well, where's the distinction in Northern Ireland law or beyond that in UK law? So as a master's student, you'd be reading into those differences. And of course, they can be very interesting differences. If we go back to that discussion about how law acts in society, well, one of the things we're very interested in is comparing societies, and very often the most fruitful comparison is between societies and legal systems that are quite similar or very similar, and then seeing why and how they've developed. Yenica, work placements, internship options that are available. I'll let Dahi say a word or two about this. We've been working very hard with a lot of employers at developing placement opportunities, and we do have a lot of contacts with employers. And as things stand, there are a number of employers who are very interested in bringing students in on placement. Now, I will say that this situation is quite uncertain, so a number of placement schemes have been suspended as firms try and figure out exactly how they can support people who are on placement when they're working from home, for instance. And so there's a bit of an uncertain situation there. So I can't say for certain what the placement availability, what placement availability will look like, say in the spring coming. It really depends on the economy, and it depends on public health advice. Okay. I don't know, Dahi, did you want to say anything about that? If you don't, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, we've had quite a few students doing placements of various sorts, and in some cases where there's an existing scheme in a firm or an organization, but it can be something where you're going in on your own. We are trying to work with employers and the types of public bodies that Kieran mentioned earlier on to develop opportunities. The interesting thing from the student's point of view is you can use that as part of your dissertation research, but then there are other things that are developing alongside that might not make their way into a final dissertation, but are still useful experiences. Picking up a couple of other questions from the list. Chloe was asking about studying something at undergraduate, whether it was the same module again. No, that's not the case. There's always, even if the title appears similar, there are going to be significant differences, particularly in teaching style, because we would be expecting postgraduate students to be developing as writers, as researchers, with quite discussion-focused classes, often in a comparative or international context. So even if you have studied, say, medical law at undergraduate, you're very welcome to study medical law as part of an LLM, and you would certainly get a lot that's new out of that. We still have a couple of other questions coming through. Rory asked about getting information about a particular module. For modules, there's summaries available through the university website of what the typical content would look like, and we're more than happy if you get in touch with us to supply any further information as you want it. Just to clarify, because we've had a few questions on this, there is not a requirement to submit a dissertation proposal as part of your application for the LLM. The identification of a dissertation happens during your period of study with us. And you would have, again, support as part of your research skills training. You'd have support and advice on how to put together a proposal. It is possible to write a dissertation on a topic that's not obviously catered for within the master's, there are always risks that go with that in terms of the experience that you might have, and it's always going to be subject to the availability of a supervisor who can support you with your work. We do try in the process of managing dissertations to be as flexible as possible. The best dissertations are those that come from the initiative of the researcher, a topic that you want to look into, or are curious of why no one has written about it in a particular way, or there's a gap that you have identified, and that can be something that maybe that crosses all of your modules, or something that's only taken up as a side point, or something maybe even that links together your work at undergraduate and at postgraduate level. So we do support you in doing that, but just for everybody's reassurance, you're not required to choose your dissertation at the process of application. That's something you do with support during your studies with us.
Thanks, Dahi. Also, I see an email from Karen. You're currently a student with us on the LLB program, and you're asking, are the practical aspects available to the course for those intending to go into practice? There are this isn't an LLM. This isn't a program where we would do very much in the way of clinical skills, for instance, and so that's not something that we do. What we do is we work very hard on those kind of critical skills, and then if you're on a placement, or if you're working in a firm, for instance, part-time, we try and draw what you've been doing there into the scholarship, especially through the dissertation. So it's not a master's program that is oriented towards kind of training towards practice, but it's one where, as best we can, we try and integrate those interests into your research. Madison, you've asked that a very good question about if there's a very limited number of students on a module, will the class proceed? There is a minimum number that we would teach on a module, but it's a relatively small. I think you know, if we have 4, 5, or 6 students, we might look at that quite far ahead. We are generally reluctant to pull modules when students are on it. On days and contacts, we try and focus our teaching on Tuesdays and Thursdays for master's students. That can vary according to module. We have a wide number of modules, and so it can vary. And we do some classes on Fridays as well. They tend to be daytime classes. Things will be a little bit uncertain, as you can imagine, especially in the autumn, and so a lot of the resource will be up online for you to encounter in your own time, which I think is actually quite a good thing in any case. How many hours a day might you expect to be in class on the days when you're in class? Yeah, it's quite difficult to answer for the LLM law because it depends on what you choose. But I wouldn't expect a student to spend more than 4 hours in class. It might be more if it just so happens that the timetable falls that way with what you've chosen, but I wouldn't expect more than that. You have to remember that the key time for you as a master's student is the time that you spend doing your own research. So classroom time is always there to support your reading and the development of your communication skills, and to point to the kind of the key messages that you'll encounter in the literature. But the important kind of learning that you're doing is the work that you're doing yourself through your research in the library and elsewhere. Is there anybody that I've missed so far? I think I have everybody. Coming from a humanities background, thanks very much, Claire. Is there anything you need to do before starting the course? No, I wouldn't say that. You know, there is. If you want to ping me, I can and tell me a little bit about your background. I can find some things if you want to read some articles and things for you to read. I should say, people coming from other subjects are both very welcome on our courses, and they do very well on our courses. And I have advice generally for people who are coming into the study of law from other disciplines, and that's hold on to that discipline. Just to take an example, if you had a history degree, there is a huge amount of work that can be done, both in archives or generally looking through the historical literature, where you have skills that can be brought to bear on the study of law. So I always remember a student who wrote in my area in corporate governance on company towns and towns that have been set up by companies. And she went and looked in archives, produced a really, really brilliant dissertation, and did very well, I should say.
Kieran, can I add something for Claire there, just in terms of
Yes.
our experience of students with humanities background? I associate myself completely with everything Kieran has said, but think of yourself as part of a learning community as well. In our copyright module over the last couple of years, we've introduced a topic around artificial intelligence and copyright, which sort of goes right to the heart of what is an author and where the law has a role to play. But in that class, we've had students that have first degrees in philosophy, English literature, technological subjects, and actually even having those contributions within the class and encouraging you, Claire, to share your perspective and how your background informs how you read the material, and others doing so, is what makes postgraduate classes often so interesting, because everybody comes to the class with their own professional or disciplinary expertise, and we're really encouraging you to use that and to learn from fellow students as well as from those of us who are fortunate enough to be teaching you.
Thanks, Dai. Yeah, that's really good. Jenica, you've asked about whether it would be possible to take the course entirely online or in a virtual capacity. This is something actually that Dahi and I have talked about a lot, but it's not where we're at right now. I think my preference is still to have students on campus, at least broadly speaking, where we will have and we hope to have library resources. This year is going to be quite complex, and a lot of what we do will be online. My plan, as it stands, is that I would like to see you in class at least, for each module, and that you're in class on that rota. So that there wouldn't be a week where a student wasn't in class. Why? Because it's much easier to stay engaged in class, but also because that's where the fruitful conversations can take place. Robert, how has the transition to online teaching at Queen's been so far? And is it Teams that's used? Yeah, so at the moment we're using Teams, and we're using Canvas, which is our virtual learning environment. So the resources will be up on Canvas, and then we'd be working with you live through Teams. How has it been otherwise so far? I think if you asked our master students, none of them are going to say that it's been an easy experience. With days of notice for them to switch to online tuition in the middle of the semester. So I'm not going to lie and say it's been perfect. It's been an experience that we've had to learn a lot from. I would also say that it's what we have done in the last 3 months, which has been a phenomenal shifting of our education provision onto Teams, and an expansion of our use of Canvas, that we've learned a lot, and we've been brought to a situation that might have happened slower, but it was going to happen anyway, which is that we learn how to bring a lot of our tuition into an environment that sometimes can be quite a bit easier for a student. It speaks a little bit to what Jenica has been asking about as well. So where do I see us going in the next few years? certainly for those of you who've experienced undergraduate lectures, large undergraduate lectures, it's likely that that kind of tuition can be done quite well online, and even perhaps in a little bit more of an intimate environment online than in a lecture theatre with 500 people in it. Smaller groups where the education happens in the context of a conversation. We're working very hard right now on replicating those conversations on Canvas and through Teams. They won't be the same thing. There's a different way of holding conversations online, and so we'll be doing a lot of that. But that spontaneous looking people in the eye and speaking with them through a seminar, we'll be doing that as much as we can in line with the public health guidance as well. So that's a very long-winded answer to how has it been going. It's been complex, but we've learned a lot, and we've learned what we can do well here. We've learned how to do it, and we'll be implementing that in the new year. Sorry, I do very long-winded answers. Is there anything else that people wanted to ask? The issues which resulted in strike action this year, have they been resolved, or are they ongoing? The conversations that have been had between unions and the university changed, of course, when we responded to the pandemic. Academics and university managers are fundamentally interested in looking after our students, and we've come together a lot on that. The issues around strikes at a national level have been are still there to a large extent, but I wouldn't make any claim certainly here about how that conversation will shift over the next year or two. I would say that at Queen's, we have a very good relationship at a local level with our employers. Anything else? Okay, I think that that's everything, unless anybody wants to ping in right now. So my email address, in case you didn't pick it up, is c.o'kelly, c.okelly @qub.ac.uk. And please do drop me a line. I can sometimes be a little bit slow getting back to you a day or two, but I'm very happy to get in touch, and if needs be, to have a chat in this environment or elsewhere about your choices. And mostly, thanks very much for joining us, and hopefully looking forward to seeing you in person in the new year, in the new academic year, I should say. Thank you.